But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters. It's alive. Those were the days with George.
Good morning,
Mitchell.
everybody.
Good morning, George.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Okay, thank you.
Good to
Great
see
day,
you.
lovely sunny day for the cup final.
It is. Yeah, God, it used to be a proper occasion, the cup final, didn't it, George?
Yeah, we the whole family used to get together, and didn't matter who was playing.
Yeah.
And it used to be an all-day event, you know, from the preamble of how they got there through the match, and then after the match, the presentations, and then we'd finish off with a whacking great tea or supper, and all the fellas would be having a pint, and it was a great day. Great day.
Great days, yeah. And good morning, everybody in the chat. I'm not going to bring your comments up, guys, because I'll do the early doors. Kevin, good morning. Good morning, David. Good morning, Paul. But we're going to crack on because I think most of you who are regular followers of this show know that this is quite a long show. It's usually about an hour and a half these days. So we will crack on. George, what season are we looking at today?
We're looking at 80-81. This is the third season for Bill McGarry. And we'll see what the outcome is. Just to set the scene, as I usually do, 1980, if you're into your music, Top of the Pops was Blondie, and Adamant with the Ant music, Derry's Midnight Runners with Gino, and the Specials with Too Much Too Young. And if you were a picture goer, cinema goer, the big pictures were Empire Strikes Back, Airplane, Stir Crazy, and 9 to 5. And I got to see all of those movies I would go to see. There's no doubt about that. Having mentioned that it's Bill McGarry's third year, and there he is with the squad. He's not the most popular manager we've had. In fact, he's got a lot of big catching up to do with the fans. Each year he's had a clear out. The first year, he got rid of 14 players and brought 12 in. The next year, he got rid of 10 players and brought 12 in. This year, he gets rid of another 10 players and brings in another 8. And the trouble is, in getting rid of players, he doesn't get rid of people who are dead legs. He's getting rid of some of the popular players like Irvin Natras. And this year, he gets rid of Tommy Cassidy and one or two others who really had a standing with the fans, so he's not going to win any popularity contests as Bill. However, he did bring some good youngsters in. The plus for me was, and there's one of them. There's Chrissy Waddle, who he just signed from Town Law, and within weeks of him signing him from Town Law in the Northern League, that's Chrissy playing at St James's Park in the first team. And I'd say that for McGarry. When he brought youngsters in, he gave them a try, and that's one that he can rest on his laurels about, because he was to become more than a hero, a legend at Newcastle United. And that's a picture of the Gallagher end. You can see how there's a big bit missing because they've got the cages up where they're still working on.
Just looking at that, George, that's actually Chelsea, mate. It's not the Gallagher end. That's Chelsea.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. And I've only just noticed that. Yes,
it is. Yes, sorry.
But it's very, very similar to the way that the Gallagher end looked back in those days. Yeah. The only reason I've just cottoned on is the scoreboard was slightly bigger, and I'm thinking, is that the scoreboard? But it's Chelsea 6, Newcastle 0. That's
the other reason I put it up, was because it was a mess, that match. It really did get.
Well, anyway. I'm sure we'll come. I'm sure we'll come to that. But the Gallagher end was like that. It was a mess back in those days, George.
And the season started with its usual host of friendlies, a trip to Sweden, and then come home to a friendly with Hearts, and then a friendly with Leeds, for which they printed a programme. Now, it's unusual for them to print a programme for a friendly, but they printed this one sheet for Leeds United, which was unusual. And, it, like everything else, there'd always be a reason. There wasn't a huge crowd for that friendly. It was only about 8,000, but nonetheless, it was a 2-2 draw and an entertaining game. So the first league match was on the Saturday following, and it was Sheffield Wednesday, and at Sheffield Wednesday. And Sheffield Wednesday managed at this time by Jack Charlton. And in their team, they had Ray Blackhall, who we know very well, and one or two other players, Ian Mellor, Andy McCulloch, who'd come to them from Manchester United and Manchester City, respectively. Our team, well, Bill McGarry's decided that Kevin Carr's the goalkeeper, and he picks Carr, Kelly, Davis, Peter Cartwright, another youngster he brought from North Shields, who he's really been faithful to, Stuart Bohm, Steve Carney, Bill Rafferty, Bobby Sinton, Ray Clark, Kenny Wharton, and Franz Koenen, a Dutch lad that he brought in. And at Hillsborough, 26,000 at the game, and it's not one of our best games. Hard fought first half 0-0, but the second half, Andy McCulloch on 67 minutes, and then Kevin Taylor on 76, give Sheffield Wednesday a 2-0 victory. And from then on in, we weren't in that game. It just ran away from us, really. And so we come home to a home match against Notts County, and McGarry, as always throughout his time, he'd be very faithful to the people he picks. The only change was that he puts David Barton in instead of Peter Cartwright because of injury. So we go against Notts County. 17,200 at the game, which tells you how the Newcastle fans are thinking about the club at the moment, and particularly about McGarry. Notts County come with their old style manager, Jimmy Cyril, a great old player and manager, and a number of players like Ray O'Brien, Eddie Kelly, Don Masson, who used to play for Middlesbrough, and Trevor Christie on the left of that attack that they'd got from Sheffield United, a clever player. But in the back line was a name we would get to know, and that is Brian Kilcline, who would later on in his career be quite important to us. In fact, become an icon in many ways for us. And it was a fairly dour game. I remember being at this game, and it was Don Masson give Notts County the lead on 52 minutes after a fairly turgid first half 0-0. And then on 77 minutes, Alan Shoulder scores the equaliser. And from then on in, it was backs to the wall for Notts County, because Newcastle really had a go at them. But it ended up 1-1, and was, how can I say it? It was an interesting backs to the wall event towards the end. So then we go away to Bolton Wanderers, and a team like us that's come down from the first division in recent years, Burnham Park with 11,800 in it, which must have been terrible because that's a nice big ground. And we go to Bolton Wanderers, whose manager is a young man called Stan Anderson, who it's a name that everybody in the Northeast knows very well. Having captained all three Northeastern teams, Stan is now managing Bolton. One or two stars in that team, ex-stars, Mike Walsh, David Berg, all former Manchester City players. But then in the forward line, they've got a Manchester United player called Brian Kidd. And on the left side of their attack, between the left side and going up the centre, a young man called Alan Gowland, who's well known to us in the northeast of England as well. Bill McGarry sends the same team. It's Carl, Kelly, Davis, Bohm, Barton, Rafferty, Shoulder, Sinton, Ray Clark, Kenny Wharton, and Franz Koenen. who's injured, and Peter Cartwright comes on. It's not the best game we've had. We go down to 29 minutes. Brian Kidd scores. 39 minutes. Brian Kidd scores, and then just after half time, 48 minutes, Brian Kidd makes it a hat trick, and then Neil Watmore is the name that we know from later in his career. On 80 minutes, makes it 4-0. We could have played all day in that match against Bolton and would never have scored. It really was a very, very poor defeat. We never were in the game to any extent, and that's one of those that you're glad to forget about. But we can't forget about things too much, because we're back home for the League Cup second round draw, and we're playing Bury in the second round of the League Cup, and it's a game everybody thinks we'll win. I mean, I remember the chat in the Gallagher corner was that this was going to take us through straight away. Well, it wasn't like that at all, as usual, Newcastle United. However, the crowd was 9,000 in St James's Park is really abysmal, and Bury came and fought like mad. We 1-1 at half time. Nicky Butler and Bill Rafferty scored for us, Nicky Butler for them, and then just to add to grist to the mill, just after half time, Alan Shoulder makes it 2, so a 2-1 and seemed to be going very nicely. But then Steve Johnson for Bury makes it 2-2, and you can feel the panic spreading around the crowd in the Gallagher corner, thinking, "What the hell's going on here? This is supposed to be a straightforward thing. Nothing straightforward about it." But the rescue comes from Bill Rafferty when he gets his second goal, and on 66 minutes, and takes us through 3-2. The Bury team includes names that we know. Pat Howard, who used to be with us. Keith Kennedy, somebody who transferred to us. And one or two ex-big players like Steve Johnson, Nick Butler from the Manchester teams, and Carl Holford and John Waddington from Stoke City. So they had a team of ex-professional, well, ex-first division players who were mixed with their youngest, and they just give a good account of themselves. So 3-2, and far from being, as I say, the easy task that we thought it was going to be. We faced Luton at home next in a league game, and wondering what's going to be the outcome of that. So Luton come to St James's, and the crowd's picked up a little bit, 13,000 in the Gallagher, and it's the Bury game sets off a train of events. The chairman, Bob Rutherford, resigns, and Stan Seymour comes in, and within a few days of Seymour coming in, he gets rid of Bill McGarry. So we enter this game with, at the top of my papers, it says no manager. Well, the reality was the coach, Willie McFall, was running the team. And so he sent out virtually the similar team. Slight changes though: Hardwick and goal, Steve Carney, Ian Davis, Nigel Walker, Stuart Bohm, David Barton, Alan Shoulder, Gary Nicholson, Bill Rafferty, Terry Hibbert, and Franz Koeman. And it seemed to liven the team up a little bit. They looked more lively, but lively or not, nerves were set on end in the 8th minute when Brian Steen, Luton centre forward, who ex-Coventry centre forward, and who pressed for England at the time, a real dangerous player, scored on 8 minutes. He waltzed through the defence unmarked at a corner and made no mistake from the penalty spot. with his header. And so that's Luton going 1-0 in the lead. David Pleat is their manager by now, which is a name that people will recognise, I suspect. The Luton team, again, it's another team that's made up of young people and senior people that they've got from other places, like Mal Donaghy in defence from Manchester City, Tony Grealish from West Ham, Ricky Hill from West Ham, Brian Steen, as I've said, and Frank Bunn, who was a dangerous left winger from Chelsea. Didn't play for Chelsea long, but he that's where he went. So we're sweating on 1-0, 61 minutes, and Franz Koenen scores one of his rare goals to Newcastle, makes it 1-1. And then Terry Hibbert on 78 minutes took a free kick just outside the area and made it 2-1. So we get the points off that one, and a huge sigh of relief for the 12,000 plus that were there. And we now go away to Bury for the second leg of the League Cup, and everybody thinks that as they did in the first game, well, this is a formality. Well, if Bury play the way they did in the first game, it's no formality. 4,500 at the game, and still Newcastle United labelled as no manager. Steve Hardwick, Steve Carney, Ian Davis, Nigel Walker, Stuart Bohm, Kenny Wharton, Alan Shoulder, Bobby Shinton, Bill Rafferty, Terry Hibbert, and Franz Koenen, with Kenny Mitchell, the substitute. Bury played almost the same team as they did in the first game. And of course, Pat Howard and Keith Kennedy were both in the team. And they're all senior professionals like Craig Madden and Alan Waldron, Mickey Butler, and Steve Johnson were all in the team as well. And game's going quite well. Then on 33 minutes, some poor marking at a corner, and Dave Bradley, one of their big defenders, heads in the corner at 32 minutes, and Bury are 1-0 in the lead. Well, in those days, it was away goals count. And with that one goal, Bury knew they were through. So they just mounted the backs to the wall game, and we just couldn't get through them. We just couldn't get near them. It was so even after extra time, it remained 1-0, and Bury went through to the next round of the League Cup, and we were well and truly out. So after that, we went home to a home league game against Cardiff, a team that was struggling like we were. Few more people in the ground, 15,000. Cardiff attract a few more people than other teams had, and still no manager in place in the dugout. Willie McFall carrying on. Steve Hardwick, Carney, Davis, Walker, Bohm, Kenny Mitchell, Alan Shoulder, Bill Rafferty, Ray Clark, Terry Hibbert, and Franz Koenen. And that's it. Just like McGarry did, they seem very faithful to the people that they've put in. Cardiff City, managed by Richie Morgan, an ex-Welsh international from Swansea, now manager at Cardiff. And they had a team, as you can imagine, full of ex-Welsh internationals with one or two stars like Ray Bishop, Peter Kitchen, dangerous forwards, Phil Dwyer at centre-half, and Keith Ponton at full-back. They're well-established Welsh internationals. And so it's not the best game I've seen. I've got to say, I remember being there. Cardiff were determined to get a point out of it, and that's the sort of game it was. It was Ray Clark at 22 minutes got with the first goal, and then on 32 minutes there was a penalty, and Alan Shoulder stuck that away, and then Cardiff came out a little bit in the second half, and lo and behold, from a corner, Peter Kitchen headed them a goal, and that made it 2-1. So then it became backs to the wall for Newcastle because Cardiff really had to go. But we held on, 2-1 win, and we're starting to climb the league a little bit because people are getting a bit of a sweat on. No manager, no sense of direction from the club at the moment. So the next game's a away game rather, at the Queen's Park Rangers, and we know this is going to be a tough game. They're playing well at the moment, Queen's Park Rangers, but lo and behold, we 10,000 at the ground at Loftus Road, and Tommy Docherty's their manager now, a big character and well-known figure, and that's his picture on the programme there, shaking hands with somebody. Their team has one or two names that we recognise, like Glenn Roeder, David McGarry, Wayne Faraday, and Tony Curry, who was a star with Sheffield United and ended up QPR. Very, very clever ball player. And Tommy Langley from Chelsea, a great winger, but also a Geordie in essence. So, and we now have Newcastle with a manager called Arthur Cox. Arthur Cox is installed as manager just the week before this game. He just lets Willie McFall pick the team, and it's the same team: Steve Hardwick, Carney Davis, Walker, Bourne, Mitchell, Shoulder, Rafferty, Clark, Hibbert, and Franz Conan, with Cartwright as the substitute. And it goes well for Arthur Cox for his first game. Stuart Bourne heads in a corner on 26 minutes. And there it is. That's Stuart doing the business. And Terry Hibbert on, Bob Hazel for QPR gets an equaliser on 56 minutes. And then Terry Hibbert on 73 minutes with a free kick from just outside the penalty area makes it 2-1. And we hang on to the 2-1 without any problem at all. So a good away victory, good start for Arthur Cox, and good way of picking the team up, because things were looking a bit sad and were sliding down to the wrong end of the league at that time. And so we now have a home game against Oldham Athletic, and it's a one that we hope, because Oldham aren't playing particularly well, we might get something out. And the win, it's amazing how a win affects the crowd, because suddenly for a team like Oldham, we've got nearly 20,000 at the game, where before we were struggling to get into 20,000 at all. So we got Oldham at home, and it's St James's Park, and Arthur Cox picks the same team: Steve Hardwick, Carney Davis, Walker, Bourne, Kenny Mitchell, Shoulder, Rafferty, Clark, Hibbert, and Conan. And Oldham have now acquired a new manager themselves from Notts County, Jimmy Frizzle, who we've talked about before. Great old character, great as a player and as a manager. And Oldham come with again the mix of youngsters and former First Division star John Hurst playing with Kenny Clements, John Hurst from Everton, Kenny Clements from Manchester City, Paul Atkinson from Sheffield United, and Simon Stainrod from Manchester City, and Roger Wilde from a Manchester United player who didn't hit the heights, but he certainly stayed with Manchester United a long time. So it was an interesting game, and ended up 0-0. They could have played all day, and neither side would have scored. But it was one of those 0-0s that there was some enjoyable football. There was some good football, and we got a point that kind of pacified the Gallowgate corner a little bit, but still put them a little bit nervous for what was where we were in the league. We were struggling to be in the middle and not very comfortable. So our next game is the away game at Bristol Rovers, and we go to Bristol Rovers, and there's 5,500 at the game at Ashton Gate, at Bristol City rather. It's sorry, it is Bristol Rovers. Yeah, it is Ashton Gate because they're playing their games at Bristol City's ground because the Bristol Rovers ground's getting redeveloped. And there's 5,100 at the game. And Bristol Rovers have Terry Cooper, the former Leeds and England fullback, as their manager. And they're littered with people we know, like Martin Thomas in goal, Aidan McCaffrey at centre-half, Stuart Barraclough on the right wing for them, and other well-known players like Mark Hughes, Gary Mabbitt from Spurs, and Tony Pulis, the well-known manager these days, but those days was quite a player and Welsh international, and he was in the Bristol team. It was our team unchanged by Arthur Cox, still left things as they were with Kevin. The only change was Kevin Carr was back in goal because he was fit again. Peter Kelly and Davis, Walker, Bohm, Carney, Shoulder, Rafferty, Clark, Hibbert and Cornan, with Cartwright as the substitute. And, I wish I could tell you lots of good things about this game, but I cannot. It's another 0-0, but this time a very, very dour 0-0. I couldn't even find a reference to the ball hitting the woodwork at all. Sometimes, like the previous 0-0, the ball was hitting the woodwork quite often, but this one, they didn't even come near hitting the woodwork. But nevertheless, and a point away from home for Newcastle at this time was an important point. And so we come home to a match against West Ham United, and West Ham attracted a bigger crowd than many. Generally well liked in the Gallowgate. 24,800, nearly 25,000 to greet West Ham. And Arthur Cox picks an unchanged team with Kevin Carr in goal, and etc. West Ham manager is John Lyle, an ex-player of theirs, and their side is still littered with one or two former stars like Ray Stewart at fullback, Alvin Martin, who was regarded as a top centre half in those days, Billy Bonds, Frank Lampard Senior, Alan Devonshire, Pat Holland. Now, if you look at the England setup, you'll find there's a Pat Holland sitting alongside Gareth Southgate as one of the medical team on the England setup, and he's the son of the Pat Holland that played for West Ham. Jimmy Neighbour they got from Spurs. Paul Goddard's a name that we get to know at Newcastle very well. He's in the forward line, and David Cross that they paid a lot of money for from Leicester. West Ham, one of the favourites to go up, so we're expecting an entertaining game. It was an entertaining game, but guess what? 0-0 again. 3 0-0s on the trot, which is a bit miserable from a goal scoring point of view. However, more importantly, it keeps us in the middle of the league and away from the concerns and worries of relegation and all that goes with that. Our next game is an away game at Preston, and we want to. Preston are bumping along the bottom, and so it's a good opportunity to get some points in this game. So we go to Preston, and Arthur Cox sends exactly the same team out, Carr, Kelly, Davis, Walker, Bourne, Mitchell, Shoulder, Martin, Shinton, Rafferty and Terry Hibbert, and Peter Cartwright as a sub. Preston North End have Nobby Styles, the ex-World Cup player, as their manager now, and their team is littered with former players from the Manchester area, as you can imagine, like Brian Taylor, Francis Burns, Michael Baxter, Stephen Doyle from Manchester City, Stephen Elliott, and a young man playing in the forward line called Alex Bruce, who we had for a couple of years from them, and then we sold him back. I got our money back for Alex, and he's there playing against us now. Always a dangerous thing to happen if you're a Newcastle fan, because it's amazing how ex-players love to stick one in the back of the net against the Magpies. So with our team unchanged, we go to Deepdale, 5,300 there, and that reflects where they are, bumping along the bottom. And we get off to a good start. Bobby Shinton scores on 28 minutes, Bill Rafferty on 31, and it looks like we're going to run away with it, 2-0 at half-time. But immediately after half-time on 47 minutes, Gordon Coleman scores a one for them. And then, lo and behold, on 62 minutes, Alex Bruce, the very same I've just talked about, equalised for Preston, and it looked like we were going to struggle to get a point. But Bobby Shinton came up with a brilliant header at a corner on 83 minutes, and we took the points with a 3-2 win. An entertaining game, and a one which did our league position a lot of good. We're now just above the middle of the league, and that's people are getting quite pleased about that. The next game is away to Bristol, and we and this time it is the City. They go to Ashton Gate, 10,500 at the game, which was a big crowd for them. Bobby Houghton is their manager, ex-player who's gone through the ranks and stayed with them, and a team with lots of, as you imagined, former First Division players on the way down. Tom Ritchie, Kevin Mabbott, Jerry Gow, Alan Hay, Jerry Gow, Manchester United, Clive Whitehead, Manchester United, Jeff Merrick and Jerry Sweeney, the fullbacks from Manchester City, and Ray Cashley, a goalkeeper from Manchester City as well. Our team, Arthur Cox sends the same team down to Ashton Gate, and Alan Shoulder unfortunately gets injured in halfway through the first half, and Peter Cartwright has to come on as the substitute. Again, we 0-0 at half time, fairly dour first half, never looked like scoring. And then on 71 minutes, Tom Ritchie scores a beautiful goal from the edge of the penalty area with a right foot drive. And then on 90 minutes, we give a penalty away. A bit of careless defending by Kenny Mitchell, and Tom Ritchie steps up and makes it 2-0 for Bristol. So we lose 2-0, a game which we'd had hopes of getting at least a point out of. Well, we never looked like getting a point. It was a pretty straightforward win for Bristol City. And we're now heading home to a game against Swansea. The Swansea are playing quite well and are now in about the same position as we are, about the middle of the league. So this isn't going to be an easy game. It's going to be a one we'd have to fight for. And lo and behold, we had to. We unchanged team from Arthur Cox, Carr, Kelly, Davis, Martin, Mick Martin, etc. And 16,200 at the game. And Swansea have John Toshak, the ex-Welsh international and Liverpool star, as their manager now. And they're littered with Welsh internationals, former Welsh internationals, Leighton Phillips, Neil Robinson, Brian Athy, Leighton James, David Giles, Alan Waddle from Liverpool, and Jeremy Charles, who's the last of the Charles brothers, John and Mel Charles. Well, Jeremy's the younger brother and a Welsh international, but not quite the star that his older brothers were. Brian Athy scores for Swansea in 28 minutes and we're 1-0 down at half time. And but we're being lively enough to see that we might get into the game. But then Alan Waddle, the ex-Liverpool man, dances through our defence and makes it 2-0 on 65 minutes. And then just before the end, on 88 minutes, Bill Rafferty gets us a consolation. But it means we'll have an exciting 5 minutes before the end of the match, because we hammered them back and forward all the time, giving them a really tough time. But we lost 2-1, and there was palpable disappointment in the crowd, I'll have to say, but not the sort of boos and derision that had been received by the previous manager, because people were fed up with him. So Arthur Cox got away with one then there. And the next game is a home game against Shrewsbury Town, and it's reflecting on the previous loss, of course. Attendance at St James's was 11,900. And for those of you that haven't experienced it, I've got to say 11,000 in St James's Park is dire. You've got to shout to speak to your neighbour that far apart. But never mind, 11,900. And they're not playing very well. They're bumping along the bottom. So everybody's hopeful that we may get something out of this game. Pre-match, Arthur Cox for once talks to the local papers and said how hopeful he is. And he praised the same team, Carney, etc., right down to Terry Hibbert on the left side. And then Shrewsbury come with a manager called Graham Turner, a great player and coach, most of his career with Luton, but very, very highly regarded as a coach and part of the England setup in those days. And Shrewsbury came with a mixture of, as usual, a lot of these teams, former first division players and young players. And Graham Turner, of course, was himself a player manager. He was actually in that team. And with John Ray, David Tonk from Stoke, Ian Atkins from Sheffield Wednesday, Steve Cross from Leicester. There's some good players, good players from the first division. Fairly a 0-0 first half, but entertaining. There was some good football from both sides. Shrewsbury didn't come just to defend. They really did have a go, which livened it up a little bit. Then just after half time, Bobby Shinton scored at 47 minutes to give it a 1-0 lead. And we never looked like losing it, to be honest. It was our game from then on in. And so we got the points and solidified our position in the middle of the league. So we're off to a game at Chelsea now, and it's a game to remember for the wrong reasons. Chelsea have got Jeff Hurst, the ex-World Cup player, as their manager, and starting to get some youngsters coming through who have got making a name for himself. Mickey Droy, Colin Lee, Dennis Roth, John Bumstead, Peter Rhodes-Brown, Clive Walker, Ian Britton and Phil Driver. They're starting to get a new squad together. 22,900 at the game at Stamford Bridge. And Arthur Cox sends our team virtually unchanged, except instead of Franz Conan on the left, he plays Chris Waddle. He gives young Chrissy Waddle an opportunity to get into the team. And unfortunately, he's injured before half time, and Franz Conan has to go on as a substitute. A game we were never in, never looked like getting in. We were down in 15 minutes, then 34 minutes, then 43 minutes, then 46 minutes, and then after half time, 51 minutes, and then just before the end, 86 minutes. So a 6-0 hammering, that's the only way to describe it, which we were never in from the beginning. It never looked like being in, and sent shivers down the spine of the Gallagher corner. I can tell you that people had visions of a relegation battle looming after this defeat. But could they recover? Well, everybody hoped that they might. So we got a home game against Watford. Watford, a decent team, but not much better, different to where we are in the league. So we get Watford to St James's Park. 14,500 there, which reflects on the previous result, of course. Arthur Cox Field's an unchanged team. Carney, Johnson, Peter Johnson, Martin, Nick Martin, Bourne, Kenny Mitchell, Sinton, Wharton, Clark, Shoulder, and Terry Hibbert. Now, Watford have Graham Taylor as the manager, a well-known manager for a lot of years, and then ultimately coming the England manager. And Eric Steele in goal at Geordie, they're playing in goal for them. Mick Henderson, who they got from our friends down the road. Wilf Rostron, who came from the Mackhams as well. Kenny Jackett, who's legendary figure at Watford for years. Ray Traynor, they got from West Ham. Ross Jenkins from West Ham. John Ward from Chelsea. And the big star, Luther Blissett, the centre forward, very dangerous West Indian lad who's huge guy. His sheer presence in the penalty area is enough to put defenders off. So we play Watford, and we get a great start on 12 minutes. Terry Hibbert slots the first goal in from a corner, and then Bobby Sinton on 23 minutes heads in another one, and 2-0. It looks like we're cruising. And then just before half time, Malcolm Poskett for Watford gets a header, and the nerves begin to jangle just before half time. 2-1, and Watford playing well. So expecting a tough second half. And of course, it was a tough second half because Watford really had a go. But thankfully, Mick Martin and Stuart Bourne particularly stuck out, and we got a 2-1 victory, which after last week's 6-0 hammering, drew lots of sighs of relief, I've got to say, around St James's that day. So Watford are dispatched, and we're now off to an away game at Cambridge, and Cambridge aren't tearing up trees. They're just below middle and struggling a little bit. So there's hope that we might get something from this game. And Arthur Cox sends an unchanged team from Kevin Carter, Terry Hibbert, all the same. And Cambridge United have John Doherty as their manager, and he's an ex-Cambridge player and been with one or two teams, but Cambridge was his main club when he played, and he ends up being their manager, which happens so regularly. They have, like a lot of these teams that have players that have either come from First Division. Cambridge have one or two Scottish lads in, George Riley, who they picked up from Hibs, and Derek Christie, who they got from Hearts, I believe. and they played some decent football, but they were struggling to keep the goals out. That was their problem. So people in the Gallagher thought, well, yeah, there's a chance to get some points, and unfortunately, goal down in 16 minutes, so it's 1-0 at half time. Bobby Sinton at 53 minutes gives me an equaliser, but then Stephen Spriggs, the centre forward, scores on 68 minutes. And that's the way it stays to the end, a 2-1 loss to Cambridge, which was a bit disappointing, but it wasn't a hammering, and didn't damage our league position too much. So we have to face the next game, which is Notts County. They are above us in the league. They're playing quite well, and we go to the county ground, Meadow Lane, 8,100 in the game, and Notts County, virtually the same team that played us the last time, and our old friend, or soon to be our old friend, Brian Kilcline in the team. They had Trevor Christie on the left side of their attack, who they'd brought in and from the other Sheffield, from Sheffield Wednesday, and was a tidy player, dangerous player. Arthur Cox sticks by the same team. Carr, Carney, Johnson, Martin, Bourne, Kenny Mitchell, Shinton, Wharton, Clark, Shoulder, and Terry Hibbert, with Peter Cartwright as the substitute. Everybody's hopeful that if we really give this a go, we could get points out of this game. Well, give it a go. We did. It was an entertaining game, but it was yet another 0-0. But a 0-0 that had lots of excitement, with people hitting bars and hitting posts and all the rest of it. So 0-0 it was. We got a point which kept smiles on faces, because it meant that we weren't slipping down the league like was the big worry, of course, at the time. So we now are at home to Sheffield Wednesday, and Arthur Cox, as his predecessor, very faithful to the team. Carr, Carney, Johnson, Nick Martin, Stuart Bohm, Kenny Mitchell, Sinton, Wharton, Shoulder, and Hibbert. And Sheffield Wednesday still managed by Jack Charlton, of course. Bob Boulder, the goalkeeper now, a goalkeeper with a big history in football, from the south of England rather than the north of England. But he made his real name at Sheffield Wednesday. Ray Blackhall was in that team. Jeff King, Terry Curran, Andy McCulloch, Ian Mellor, players that had made their name in higher division, but were now plying their trade at Sheffield Wednesday. Interesting enough, that the Ian Mellor, who's I mentioned in the Sheffield team, there's a Mellor that's a manager of one or two local non-league teams in this area. Recently Blythe Spartans even, and I believe he's a grandson of the Ian Mellor that I've just mentioned, but another local player. Anyway, we it's an entertaining game. Sheffield played some good football, and on 32 minutes, Bobby Shinton gives us the lead, and that's the way it stays. Second half was entertaining, end-to-end stuff, people hitting woodwork and all that sort of thing. Made it an entertaining day for the fans in the Gallagher, and a 1-0 win meant they went home quite happy. So the next game is a home game against Wrexham. Now Wrexham are struggling, but they're the side that doesn't give up easy, and they come to us with 15,900 in the ground at St James's. We fielded an unchanged team, Kevin Carr, etc. And Wrexham come with their manager is Mel Sutton, who's ex-Welsh international, ex-Swansea player, ex-Sunderland player. And he's the player manager. And they have Di Davis in goal, Gareth Davis at centre-half, Frank Carradus, Steve Fox, Ian Arkwright, all Welsh internationals, Ian Edwards, and Les Cartwright on the left side of their attack. They're a dangerous team, a good mixture of young and old players, professionals, and give Newcastle a difficult time. And on 23 minutes, Dixie McNeil, as he's called, makes it 1-0 for Wrexham. The second half was one-way traffic. Newcastle absolutely pummeled Wrexham, but couldn't get a ball in the back of the net. So we end up with a 1-0 defeat when everybody was hoping we might have got a victory out of the game. We then are away to Orient for a fixture. Orient are about middle of the table, like us, just below middle of the table. And at Brisbane Road, what they call the Matchroom Stadium these days, 5,800 at the game. Jimmy Bloomfield's their manager, ex-England fullback and Blackpool player. And they have a team which is a mixture of ex-West Ham, Chelsea and Arsenal and QPR, you name it, they're all there. Like Stan Bowles in their attack, Joe Mayo, both from QPR, Nigel Gray, Tommy Taylor, Bill Ruffy, all from West Ham, and Mervyn Day, their goalkeeper, ex-West Ham. So quite an array of former London stars, as it were. Arthur Cox sends us with an unchanged team, and we hope people, the fans at least, are hopeful we get something out of this game, and they don't disappoint. They 0-0 at half time, but they give a good account of themselves. Then on 58 minutes, Bobby Shinton makes it 1-0 with a good header from a corner, and then unfortunately we go to sleep right at the end. And on 85 minutes, Peter Taylor similarly gets a header from a corner for them, and we get a 1-1 draw at Orient. It's the important thing. It's a point, and it keeps it going in the right direction. We're not tumbling down to the wrong end of the league. We then are away to Swansea, and it's a game which is viewed with some trepidation on Tyneside because Swansea are now playing quite well and being talked about as possible promotion candidates. And we go to the Vetch Field with 11,500 at the game. John Toshak still the manager. Dave Stewart, a goalkeeper. Leighton Phillips, Stevenson, Brian Attlee, John Mahoney, Leighton James, Tommy Craig, ex-Newcastle player, David Rushby, Robbie James and Jeremy Charles. A good mix of teams and good football inside. Well, on that day, they were a good football inside, despite us sending an unchanged team. By half-time, we're 3-0 down. Leighton James on 11 minutes, Robbie James on 15, Jeremy Charles on 44. So go in 3-0 down, and nobody's sure what's going to happen second half. Well, on 64, Robbie James gets a second and makes it 4-0, but we never looked like getting into this game. And Swansea left us well and truly beaten on that afternoon. And it puts a dent in our league position. We're now slipping below the middle of the table, which is a bit worrying for the fans back home. And it takes us to a home game against Bristol City. And we 14,100 at the game. And Arthur Cox sticks by his team. He's unchanged team from the team that got well and truly beaten at Swansea. Not even the substitutes the same. Peter Cartwright. Bristol City come with Bobby Houghton as their manager, the ex-player, with the same team that they had in the previous game. By now they'd acquired Chris Garland from Manchester United as well to add to their attack. Tony Fitzpatrick, ex-Manchester United. So they were a decent side and a decent footballing side. However, they were well below our position in the league even, and so everybody thought, well, we should get something out of the game. Well, we got something out of the game. What we got was a dour, absolutely dour 0-0 draw. They could have played all day and neither of them would have scored. It was absolutely awful. The important point from Newcastle's point of view is it stopped the slide. We were still sitting in the middle of the league and able to keep our position in the league was the important thing, rather than slipping and sliding the wrong way down. The next game was an away game to Grimsby, and they're not doing too well at Blundell Park. Yet there was 17,500 at the game. The Grimsby manager, George Kerr, who was another ex-player managing his old team, and they had, like other teams before, a number of names which rung the bell, sort of thing. Tony Ford, Bob Cummins, we recognise, having played against us before. Trevor Wymark from Ipswich, Calvin Moore from Ipswich. So they were a decent side, but they weren't doing very well, and sort of team we needed to try and get something out of, because we hadn't been playing very well ourselves, and for once Arthur Cox rings the changes. He introduces John Truick, who just come from West Bromwich Albion, and Mick Harford into the centre forward, and Chris Waddle gets the left side of the attack. So we go to Grimsby with a changed team, which is unusual for us. Well, changed team or not, it didn't do anything for the football, because we had yet another 0-0 draw. We become the 0-0 experts in the division. It really is quite amazing and quite depressing in some ways. However, it meant that our league position was cemented round about the middle and kept where we should be. Next game is a home game against Derby County. Now, Derby County are one of the favourites to go up, and are playing very well indeed. 20,800 at the game, which is more about coming to see Derby than anything else, I think. Arthur Cox plays an unchanged team with Truick, Harford and Waddle in the forward line. And he brings Terry Hibbert in place of Kenny Mitchell. Derby County are now managed by a man called Colin Addison, who is a well-known ex-player from various clubs, but also became something of a hero at a place called Hereford later on. And Roger Jones, Roy McFarland, Steve Powell, Steve Emery, Kevin Hector, David Swindlehurst, and Paul Empson, all very talented players, younger players, and playing well for Derby. And playing well, they were on 3 minutes. Unfortunately, Stuart Bohm at a corner heads into his own net. That gives them a lead in 3 minutes. Then on 29 minutes, another corner, and Roy McFarland heads number 2 in, and that's the way it stayed. 2-0 at half time. Try as they might, Newcastle couldn't get back into this game, and Derby went away with a 2-0 victory, which they thoroughly deserved, is all I'd say. There's times when you know your team's second best, and that was one of them, I'm afraid. So we're now coming to the FA Cup, and third round of the FA Cup, and we've drawn Sheffield Wednesday, and the 22,500 at the game. It's interesting how the crowd comes up for a cup match. Arthur Cox fields an unchanged team, and Sheffield Wednesday with Jack Charlton is still their manager, and the team hardly changed from the last time we played them. In fact, unchanged from the last time we played them, with Ray Blackhall in the side, Melvin Sterling, Jeff Johnson, Terry Curran, John Pearson, and Andy McCulloch. A very good, a good game, end-to-end stuff. Chris Waddle scores his first goal, 16 minutes, to put 1-0 in the lead. John Pearson for Sheffield makes it 1-1, and it looks like it's going to be a 1-1 draw right at the end. But then suddenly on 59 minutes, Chris Waddle gets the ball on the left-hand side and dribbles his way into the penalty area and slots a beautiful right-footed shot into the bottom corner of the net to give Newcastle a 2-1 lead, which, to say it went down well with the Gallagher crowd is putting it mildly. Everybody had smiles as wide as Tynemouth on their way home from that match. So really good result, and an enjoyable game as well, which is good. The next game is away to Wrexham, and haven't had the trials and tribulations that we did against them at St James's. Nobody's overconfident about this, although Wrexham are in desperate trouble. Go to the Racecourse Ground, 6,500 at the match, and Wrexham still got Mel Sutton as their player manager, and the team virtually unchanged from the one that beat with St James's Park. Arthur Cox sends unchanged team with John Truick, and Mick Hartford and Chris Waddle still in the forward line. And he introduces a newcomer who was just brought into the squad called Bruce Halliday, who brought from one of the Sheffields. And so it's they go with the intention of having a go at this one, and everything that Arthur Cox was quoted in the local press was about how they thought they could get something out of this one. Well, they didn't get anything out of it. Well, did get a point out of it, but guess what? It was another 0-0 draw. I mean, how many times have you heard me say that this morning? A 0-0 draw. How depressing, but depressing or not, very important, because it kept our league position staying in the right direction and not going downwards at any great rate. The next game's an away game at Luton Town, and Luton aren't doing too well, and there's optimism that we may get something out of this. So we go to Kenilworth Road, 10,700 at the game. David Pleat's their manager, and the team virtually unchanged with Mal Donaghy, Mark Hazelwood, Tony Grealish, Alan West, Ricky Hill, Dave Moss, and Brian Stein, a centre forward. It's a good game end to end, but lo and behold, Mick Hartford pops up on 9 minutes and heads a superb goal from just inside the penalty area, a bullet header to the bottom right-hand corner of the net, and we're 1-0 in the lead. And that's the way it stayed until half-time. Second half, Luton started to have a go, but we held them up and had to go back at them. And we ended with the 1-0 victory, which was very important. It just stabilised our league position and made people feel a lot more comfortable. And then we have FA Cup 4th round at home, and it's against Luton Town. Would you believe? It's funny how we play them in the league and we've drawn them in the cup as well. And it's a good game. 29,000 now at the game because it's an FA Cup 4th round. It's interesting now that the smell of the cup brings the Newcastle fans out. 29,200, biggest crowd of the season by far. And Arthur Cox plays an unchanged team with the substitute as Alan Shoulder. Luton come, David Pleat's still the manager, and the team's identical to the one that we've just beaten 1-0 at Luton. So we go into this fourth round of the cup. And within 5 minutes, we're in the lead through Ray Clark. And then on 64 minutes, panic stations when Ingram for Luton equalises. And then Mick Martin scores one of his rare goals for Newcastle from a free kick on 68 minutes. And that gives us a 2-1 lead. And that's the way it stays to the end. So we're through to the next round, the 5th round of the FA Cup. And, well, you can imagine the excitement in around St James's and Alligator in particular with that match. The next game is we're at home to Bolton Wanderers. We know this is going to be a tough game, one that we going to have to be on our mettle about. 19,100 at the game. Now Arthur Cox keeps faith with his team that he'd picked previously. Carr, Carney, Johnson, Martin, Bohm, Halliday, Shinton, Truick, Clark, Wharton, Chris Worrell. He's got Clark in because Harford's injured. Bolton Wanderers are still managed by Stan Anderson and still got the same team that we played when we played them at Bolton. And knowing that in the forward line, Brian Kidd, the ex-Manchester United player, and Neil Watmore were the two danger men, and we're going to have to be really on our toes to combat them. Just before half-time, Ray Clark scores the first goal, and we go in with a 1-0 half-time lead. And then just after half-time, Michael Bennett from Bolton, the centre-forward, scores a beautiful header on 51 minutes and makes it 1-1. So there's all sorts of panic around St James's then, and Bolton really going for it. Well, our captain, courageous as he was, Mick Martin, pulls the rabbit out the hat again, and from a free kick on 67 minutes, gives us a 2-1 lead. And that's the way it stays to the end. Bolton hammered against us, but we held on to the 2-1 and got the victory that mattered. We now at home to QPR in the league, and it's funny how a couple of victories and 20,400 in the ground rather than the single, the teen digits, the 15 and 16,000s, over 20,000 at this game. Arthur Cox fields an unchanged team, except Mick Harford's fit and he plays him as substitute. And halfway through the second half, he comes on for Mick Martin. And then Queen's Park Rangers come just to acquire a new manager called Terry Venables, a name that people will recognise from not just from the league, but from England manager and all the rest of it that he did. But also in that team, one or two names that we know. The goalkeeper is now John Burridge, who becomes is a bit of a folk hero at Newcastle, and Glenn Roeder, of course, in the team, and other team players that bought Steve Wicks from Chelsea, Tony Curry, who was in the last team from Sheffield United, Simon Stainrod and Tommy Langley, who were dangerous left-sided players for them. A very entertaining game, end-to-end stuff. It wasn't a high-scoring game, but it could have been. It's one of those games where everything but put the ball in the back of the net happened. And Chris Waddle on 51 minutes scored, and that's the way it stayed right to the end. But an attractive game of football, and a very, very happy victory for Newcastle United, because it's we're now firmly in the middle of the table. We're not looking over our shoulders. So it's the FA Cup 5th round, and we draw Exeter City. Well, excitement at St James's Park, because we've got a draw in the 5th round and a team from a lower division. And the crowd suddenly goes to 36,900. I mean, it's amazing what the Cup does to Tyneside. Arthur Cox Field's an unchanged team, and he trusts in them and this Cup match. And, well, everybody thinks that Exeter City's going to be a bit of a walkover. Brian Godfrey's the manager, West Ham player, is now Exeter's manager, and they've got Martin Rogers, John Sparrow, former Cardiff players, Lee Roberts, Phil Roberts, Swansea players, John Delve and Peter Hatch from Bristol. So Exeter City come with that team, and lambs to the slaughter, if you believe what everybody in the Gallagher's saying. On 57 minutes, Alan Shoulder gives with the lead. And then, unfortunately, just before the end, 85 minutes, Lee Roberts slots in a ball which has been bounced around the penalty area, and he sticks it in to make it 1-1. And that's the way it stayed to the end. So, surprise and disappointment in the Gallagher, because this should have been a straightforward march into the next round. So the next game, of course, is the return leg at Exeter, and the return leg is a bit of a mess because it rains and rains and rains. So it has to be. You can see the water line on the ground. So do the unusual thing and play it the next day. I mean, which unusual thing to do in those days. Well, even now it would be. But because of the wet, and they played it the next day. And of course, the other interesting factor is that ground's called St James's Park as well. 17,600 at the game. Biggest crowd Exeter have had almost in the history. And they play the same team that played us at St James's, with Brian Godfrey as the manager. And Arthur Cox sends an unchanged Newcastle team, quite hopeful, and as everybody is, that we'll get a win out of this. He changes the substitute in the team to John Brownlee from Ray Harford, Rob Harford, and John Brownlee actually comes on in place of Kenny Wharton in the second half. However, the game gets off to an appalling start. Peter Hatch scores for Exeter on 13 minutes. Phil Pearson scores on 19 minutes. And then just before the half-time whistle, Peter Rogers makes it 3-0 on 42 minutes. And, it's a nightmare. It's 3-0 down at half-time to anybody, but to a team a couple of divisions below you is really disappointing. And they hung on, but not just hung on 87 minutes. Martin Rodgers makes it 4-0, so it really does rub the salt into the wounds, and we're just never in the game. You could blame the weather, the pitch, but it was the same for two teams, and Exeter just adapted to it better than we did. So that's our FA Cup at an end, which when everybody thought we got a good run. And there's one of the game matches at their ground, and that's the team in the dressing room celebrating, rightly so, and pictures that I'm sure these lads will have on the mantelpiece even now. So it was dire, absolutely dire, and disappointing. As you can see from the crowd at Gallagher, that 35,000 turn up. They're expecting something. Well, they went away and threw it away, basically. Next game is a home game against Bristol Rovers, and we have 40,500 at the game. The crowd now reducing to disappointing numbers because of the disappointing results. Arthur Cox, despite the horror of Exeter, sticks to basically the same team, except that he keeps John Brownlee in for the injury that happened at Exeter, and otherwise it's the same team. Bristol Rovers come with Terry Cooper still a manager, ex-England fullback, and with the couple of our ex-players in the team, Aidan McCaffrey at centre-half, Stuart Barraclough on the right side of their attack, Gary Mabbitt they got from Tottenham Hotspur, Mark Hughes, and Terry Cooper, of course, is player manager as well. He's still in the team. So they come to Newcastle and they set up not to lose. This was a team that came to get a point because they're bouncing along the bottom of the league now, and concerned for where they are, and dig their heels in, and it comes off for them because there's no way it looked like we were ever going to score a goal, as they were never going to score a goal. And not for the first time this morning, you've heard me say, and it's a 0-0. What a depressing 0-0 this one was as well. So, however, while it's very disappointing, the most important thing is it's a point and keeps going in the right direction. We're off to Cardiff City next game, and we go to Ninian Park. Now, they're not playing well, as the attendance suggests. 4,200. Now, Ninian Park is the Welsh stadium and would hold 60,000. So what it looked like with 4,200 in it, it must have been pretty depressing. However, depressing or not, Arthur Cox sends an unchanged team. Nigel Walker's on as the substitute. And Cardiff City, with Richie Morgan, the manager, played exactly the same team as they played at St James's Park. And they gave us a tough game then. Well, tough game again now. And on 32 minutes, Peter Kitchen there, big centre forward, puts them in the lead. And it's 1-0 at half time. And we have a go at them in the second half, but still can't score and ends up 1-0. Despite our best efforts to try and get an equaliser, it didn't come off. So we lose to Cardiff 1-0, which is quite depressing because it starts to point us in the wrong direction in terms of the league. And our next game is another away game at Oldham, Oldham Athletic. And we go to Boundary Park, 5,800 at the game. Oldham are another team that's bounced along the wrong end of the league, and with their usual team with Kenny Clements, John Hurst from Everton, Paul Atkinson from Manchester United, Paul Fletcher from Manchester United, Roger Wilde from ex-Manchester United. So the lads that have been around the Manchester area for a lot of years and playing for Oldham. Arthur Cox sends the same team he'd picked before: Carr, Brownlee, Davis, Mick Martin, Stuart Boom, Halliday, Shoulder, Truick, Harford, Wharton, and Chris Waddle. Steve Carney was the substitute, and it's a miserable game, a dour game. And guess what? You know what I'm going to say, and it's another 0-0. I mean, we're the football pool's banker on draws at the moment, and particularly 0-0 draws. The next game is another away game. The fixture people aren't very kind to us in this particular season. We're away to West Ham, and this is going to be a difficult game. West Ham are playing well, being tipped for promotion, 26,300 at Upton Park, and their team full of the stars: Ray Stewart, Billy Bonds, Frank Lampard Sr., Paul Allen, Trevor Brooken, Jimmy Neighbour, Jeff Pike, Paul Goddard, and David Cross. That's a very talented team, and a one which is going to give us a hard time. Arthur Cox sticks by his guns as usual and sends his unchanged team with Harford and Truick and Chris Waddle still in the team. And they give West Ham a good go. But unfortunately, on 2 minutes, David Cross is left unmarked, and he takes a cross from the opposite side of the field and hammers it past Kevin Carr. We give them a good game for the rest of the game, but couldn't try as we might score, and equally they couldn't score either. But it was a 1-0 defeat, but an entertaining game of football, which is a refreshing change from the misery that we had in the 0-0s that we've been getting so far. The important thing is that it hasn't damaged our league position too much. We're still hovering about the middle of the league. So we go home to a league game against Preston North End, and it's a game everybody thinks we can win, and because they're at the wrong end of the table. 12,000 at St James's Park for this one, which is a bit depressing, but nonetheless, that's what it was. How it turns out, quite an entertaining game. Arthur Cox fields an unchanged team, and Nobby Styles is the manager of Preston, ex-World Cup player. And right back for Preston is a young man called John Anderson, who's somebody who we know very well up here, and is something of a legend in this part of the world. So that's the first time John appears on a programme to do with Newcastle United, but for the opposition. The Preston team, of course, is full of ex-First Division teams: Coleman, Doyle, Burns, all former Manchester City and players. Alex Bruce, of course, ex-Newcastle United centre forward, and Paul McGarry, the bought from Manchester United. It's a good game, an entertaining game, and we 37 minutes. Mick Harford makes it 1-0, and it stays like that right to the 81st minute when Mick Harford makes it 2-0 with a pile driver from the edge of the penalty area, and we end up with a decent and straightforward 2-0 win, which makes the league table look a lot better than it was, as far as we're concerned. We go to Shrewsbury now, and everybody's hopeful that we seem to have put ourselves right, and that we might get a point. Well, 4,500 at the game. Shrewsbury with Graham Turner, their player manager, have the team which is almost identical to the team that played us at St James's Park. And Arthur Cox sends an unchanged Newcastle team, and there's hopes that we might get something out of this game. Well, like I often say to Newcastle fans, don't hope too much, because although Shrewsbury are pretty awful, they were still able to beat us on that day, 0-0 at half time. Graham Turner himself scores on 61 minutes from a free kick and gives Shrewsbury a 1-0 lead. And despite hammering them to the end of the match, there was never looked like we were going to get a goal in that game. And so we come home to a home match against Chelsea with some trepidation, bearing in mind that we've just not so long ago at the Chelsea ground at Stamford Bridge, they walloped us 6-0. 17,200 at the game. Arthur Cox plays the same team, but with Steve Carney as a substitute, and Mick Martin gets injured in the second half, and Steve Carney comes on. It's an entertaining game. That's the first thing to say. And end-to-end stuff. Jeff Hurst is still the Chelsea manager, but the Chelsea team, which is virtually the team that hammered us at Stamford Bridge, can't make any impression on us at all. And Bruce Halliday, who's been brought into the team by Arthur Cox, scores on 37 minutes to give us a 1-0 lead up to half time. The second half was end-to-end, with Chelsea really having a go, but our defence holding solid and holding on to the 1-0 lead, which delights everybody in St James's and the Gallagher, because that now really is making us very firm in the middle of the table. We're now off to an away game against Watford, and Watford's programme's always nice and colourful. I think they strip the red and yellow of it, but they always come across. People at home at Watford aren't the best team in the division, so have a go. We might get something. We go to the Vicarage Road, 10,900 at the game, and Arthur Cox sends an unchanged team to Watford. Graham Taylor still Watford's manager. Steve Sherwood, the goalkeeper. Pat Rice, that they got from Arsenal, double winner with Arsenal. Pat Rice, good little fullback, and one or two well-known players from other teams. Kenny Jackett, of course, and Jerry Armstrong, a big Irish centre forward who was around for quite a while and played for Northern Ireland in the World Cup, alongside Luther Blissett, made their attack quite a dangerous attack. And I think people expected this just would be a tough game, and so it was. 0-0 at half time, and guess what? I'm going to tell you, folks, 0-0 at the final as well. Here we are, the 0-0 experts again, which while it gets us a point, it's quite depressing in many ways. The next, we'll go home to a home game against Cambridge, and having given a good account of ourselves at Cambridge away, everybody's hopeful, and Cambridge are hanging on with their fingernails to this division, that we might at least get something out of this match. And Arthur Cox fields an unchanged team, 11,000 at the game at St James's Park, which is a smidgen crowd. I mean, as I say, that you have to shout to your next door neighbour to get them to hear you. John Docherty's still the manager of Cambridge United, the old player, and they field a team which almost identical to the one that they played when we went to Cambridge. The big centre forward did just acquired called George Riley, and they were struggling and desperate, but while they didn't come out and defend like other teams have done. They came out and had a go, and they unfortunately scored an own goal at 9 minutes. The centre half, Chris Turner, from a corner headed into his own net, and then on 32 minutes, Martin Goldsmith equalised, and it looked like it was going to be a fairly dull 1-1. But then on 68 minutes, up pops Alan Shoulder from the right side and clatters in a nice drive into the bottom corner to give a 2-1 win. And that 2-1 really does collective sigh of relief around St James's, because we now don't even need to look over our shoulder. We're well and truly on the road to safety and middle place in the league. We now got a game against Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn, good football side, a decent team. 13,000 at the game. Arthur Cox Field's an unchanged team. Carr, Brownlee, Davis, Martin, Barton, Halliday, Shoulder, Truick, Mick Harford, Kenny Wharton, Nigel Walker. Blackburn Rovers with Howard Kendall as the manager, just from Chesley Street, ex-Everton and England midfielder, and Blackburn with and Kendall, of course, was a player manager. He was actually in the team. And the centre half was a young man called Glenn Keeley, who is well known in these parts. And Simon Garner, Andy Crawford, that they got from Ipswich, a really dangerous centre forward. And they were a good footballing side, and slightly above us in the league, so we knew it wasn't going to be easy. But it turned out to be guess what? A very depressing 0-0. How many times have I said that today? 0-0, believe it or not. And while it gave us some points, the feelings in the St James's Park, and particularly in the Gallowgate, were, well, for goodness sake, when are we're going to break this cycle? We seem to be incapable of scoring goals. Anyway, the next game's an away game at Derby County. Always good games at Derby. 14,100 at the baseball ground. Colin Addison's still the manager, and littered with stars, of course. Roy McFarlane, Keith Osgood, Barry Powell, Tony Reid, Kevin Hector, Keith Wilson, and Paul Empson. And Arthur Cox sends an unchanged team from Newcastle. It's a tidy game, a good game, end-to-end stuff. Keith Wilson scores for Preston on 41 minutes. And then on 54, Roy McFarlane scores from a free kick to make it 2-0. And despite really trying hard, Newcastle couldn't score, and we ended up with a 2-0 defeat, which wasn't entirely unexpected, but still nonetheless disappointing. We come home to a home game against Grimsby Town, and Grimsby are well below us and bumping along the bottom of the league. And Arthur Cox Fields, 13,100 at the game. Fields an unchanged team. Carr, Brownlee, Davis, Martin, Barton, Halliday, Shoulder, Truick, Harford, Wharton, and Nigel Walker. The only change is that Chris Waddles not on the team because he's injured. Grimsby, George Kerr's the manager, ex player of theirs, and as in the first game against us, people like Trevor Wymark, ex dangerous centre for Tony Ford, Sheffield Wednesday, Kevin Moore, got some dangerous players, but who are on their way out. But they give us a fright just before half time. Tony Ford scores for Grimsby, and we go in a goal down. Then on 78 minutes, Alan Shoulder makes it 1-1. And then we actually hammer the Grimsby goal for the rest of the game. But to no avail, and we end up with a 1-1 draw, which isn't exactly appreciated by the fans in St James's, but better than a loss. And cements were middle table position. There's no doubt about that. So we go to Blackburn Rovers for the return game at Blackburn, and with 10,600 at Ewood Park, Howard Kendall still the player manager, Glenn Keeley still in the team, and the two teams, Arthur Cox sends an unchanged team. The two teams almost identical to the two teams that played at St James's Park. However, the result was different. John Lowry scores for Blackburn on 9 minutes, Marshall Burke on 33 minutes, Mick Spate on 68 minutes, and it's a 3-0 victory to Blackburn. We were never, ever in this game at all. I would like to be able to say that we battled to the end. Well, we didn't. It was lucky it was just 3-0. Not the best way to end the season, I have to say. And then we come home to what is the last game of the match of the season, and that's a home game against Orient. Now, Orient are already one of the relegated teams, and 11,600 at St James's, which reflects our results in previous weeks. Arthur Cox fields an unchanged team. Orient come, Jimmy Broomfield, their manager, with their ex-stars from various places in their team. And they, Nigel Walker scores on 24 minutes, John Truick on 46, and we go in with a 1-0 half-time lead, and then just after half-time, Truick scores. And then John Mayo scores on 73 minutes to give them a hope, 2-1. And then Mick Harford on 83 minutes makes it 3-1. So we end the season with a nice, tidy victory, but against a team, of course, that's already relegated. And that photograph that is Arthur Cox invited Joe Harvey into the dugout for this last match, and I think that was a nice touch. I don't know what it was all about. That's what he did, and this is an unusual picture because that's Alan Shoulder missing a penalty. He never missed penalties when he was with us, and that's it. Now, what's that one, Steve?
Now, this was the year, wasn't it, when the petrol bomb went into the
Oh,
crowd?
yes, it was. And at the West Ham game, yes, that's right, it was, and caused quite a stir. And I mean, that season we ended up 11th in the end, and Shinton was our top goal scorer with how many goals? 7. Wow. 7 goals, the top goal scorer. And if you try and calculate this morning how many times I've said 0-0. I mean, is it any wonder it was only 7? And our home goal total, 2 goals for at home for the whole season, 15. So, the disquiet that was left over after McGarry left, Arthur Cox had to pick that up and run with it. So what happens after that is down to Arthur Cox. But it wasn't the best season. But at least we stabilised ourselves in the league and had another season to look forward to. Because there was one stage where people were looking over their shoulder, I've got to say, with all these 0-0s and home defeats and so on. But ever hopeful, ever optimistic Newcastle fans, there's better to come.
It was a tough season for David. He says his dad passed away, so he didn't make many matches. JB says after the game at Sheffield Wednesday, the police kept us in. It was carnage. 6,000 rammed into 2,000 to 3,000 area behind the stand. Not much better these days, says David Cook. Paul Watson says biggest home win for Chelsea was against Newcastle 6-0. It brings back nightmares, and
it does.
I remember taking a group of Newcastle University students to the West Ham game as part of Freshers Week. The petrol bomb incident at the Leazes End didn't leave a good impression, says David. John says, morning all, this might have been the worst season in the club's history. I think we scored 30 league goals in 42 games, and only because we scored 3 in the last one. He says, that is pitiful. Colin says, happy days. That's when I started going, 1980-81, not knowing what was to come a year or two later. And John Cook also says, I remember the walk through the allotments to get to the away end at Watford.
Yes.
And
yes.
He says that Tony Ford was a good player for us in the early 70s. But wonderful recollections. Great trip down memory lane again, George. And look forward to
my pleasure.
The next one again, mate.
Thank you for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. It's very kind. Thank you.
Great stuff.
Good to see you, Steve. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. Their website is mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to contact the guys, email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to New Workwear. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider launched in 2018. For more information, go to their website, newworkwear.com. Big thanks, as always, to Media Arts for the help with the video side of things. If you want to support the channel, hit the subscribe button, become a subscriber today. Hit the thumb up under the video, which likes the video, and click share to share to your other social media. Click join if you want to become a member of the channel for as little as $1.99. Or take a one-off payment for the cult membership. You can get in via this QR code if you've got a smartphone, or look for membership pack on the website, nufcmatters.com. What do you get for your one-off £25 payment? You get a scarf, a pen, and a cup, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. Don't forget, if you want a car sticker, all you need to do is subscribe to the show and then email John at NUFC Matters, and he will post you a free car sticker out. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. And we also support the food bank on this channel. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is the virtual matchday bucket where you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. The new Alan Shearer raffle is underway. 150 tickets at £1 a ticket. You could win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball from the 260 dinner. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. We've got a few events coming up. August the 5th sees Gavin Peacock at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £10, and you can get them now from nufcmatters.com. Our Christmas event takes place on the 7th of December at the Tyneside Irish Centre, and that's an evening with Frank Clark. Tickets are £15 and available from nufcmatters.com. Finally, Waddle, Keegan, Beardsley and friends. The class of 84 is on at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on Westgate Road in Newcastle on Thursday, January the 23rd. Tickets are now available from the Tyne Theatre and Opera House.co.uk or telephone 0844 2491 000. That's the box office telephone number 0844 2491 000. We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.